Have you ever noticed how toxic people always seem to find a way to get under your skin? No matter how much you try to explain yourself, argue, or prove your point, it never seems to work. That's because their goal isn't understanding, it's control. But here's the good news. There's one powerful shift you can make that will cause toxic people to leave you alone without you saying a single word. The number one thing toxic people hate is when you stop feeding them. See, they don't thrive on truth. They thrive on reaction. They want you upset. They want you defending yourself. They want you proving your point. Because the more you react, the more control they have. So here's the shift: move from reaction D to calm non-reaction. Instead of arguing, stay neutral. Instead of proving, stay short. Instead of defending, stay silent. And watch what happens. Toxic people can't stand it. Because suddenly, the control they had over you, it's gone. They realize they can't pull you into their storm anymore. And when they can't control you, they leave you alone. So the shift isn't about them changing. It's about you choosing your peace over their chaos. And that's the kind of power toxic people can't handle. Awareness is where everything begins, because you can't change what you can't see. Most people get caught up in toxic interactions because they're reacting on autopilot. They don't even realize what's happening in the moment. Someone makes a cutting comment, someone rolls their eyes, someone tries to guilt trip you, and before you know it, you're pulled into defending yourself, over-explaining, or snapping back. That's the trap. Toxic people count on that automatic reaction. They know exactly which buttons to push, and the second you respond the way they expect, they've got you hooked. When you start becoming aware, you begin to see those patterns for what they are. Instead of thinking, why are they treating me this way, you start recognizing, oh, this is what they do. This is their pattern. And that shift alone changes the game, because awareness puts space between you and their behavior. You're no longer swallowed up in the heat of the moment. You're able to take a step back in your mind and notice what's happening without getting immediately tangled up in it. Awareness lets you slow down. It's like turning the lights on in a dark room. You start to see that the problem isn't actually about you. It's about how this person operates. And once you see that, you stop taking their words so personally. You stop carrying the weight of their tone or their accusations because you understand the pattern behind it. You know that this is what they do with everyone, not just you. And here's the thing about awareness: it doesn't just protect you in the moment. It prepares you before the moment even happens. You start to recognize the people, the situations, and the conversations that usually trigger you. So instead of walking into every interaction blind, you're already aware of what might come and how you usually respond. That preparation gives you control. You can decide in advance how you want to show up, instead of letting them dictate your reactions for you. Awareness also teaches you to listen differently. Instead of focusing on the surface of what they're saying, you hear the intention behind it. You can tell when they're baiting you. You can tell when they're exaggerating, twisting words, or trying to draw emotion out of you. And because you see it, because you notice it, the temptation to fall for it weakens. You don't get pulled as easily because your mind is alert to what's really going on instead of just the words they're throwing at you. Toxic people survive on energy the way a fire survives on oxygen. The more fuel you give them, the longer they burn. And the fuel they're after isn't kindness, it isn't understanding, it isn't reason, it's your frustration, your defensiveness, your anger, your emotional energy. They know how to pull it out of you, and they thrive when they succeed. That's why you'll notice they always push buttons that create drama. It's not random. They do it because the moment you raise your voice, the moment you get flustered, the moment you start over-explaining, they feel like they've won. The shift is realizing that you control the flow of that energy. Just like you decide where to spend your money, you get to decide where to spend your emotional currency. Every sigh, every eye roll, every 10-minute explanation trying to prove yourself, that's all energy you're handing over. And the more you hand out, the emptier you feel while they walk away strangely satisfied. It's not always obvious because sometimes they mask it under sarcasm or fake concern or guilt tripping, but underneath all of it is the same thing. They're feeding off what you give back. When you start pulling that energy back, things change. Imagine someone throwing a ball at you over and over and you just stop catching it. It doesn't bounce the same. The game ends. That's what it looks like when you don't give the reaction they expect. You stop fueling the fire, and suddenly the blaze doesn't feel so powerful anymore. They might push harder at first because they're desperate for that energy they're used to getting from you. But when it's no longer there, when you refuse to hand it out, the pattern begins to shift. And here's the key part. It's not about ignoring people completely or pretending they don't exist. It's about staying centered in your own energy. Instead of leaking it every time someone pokes at you, you hold it. You stay calm, you stay measured, you keep your words and expressions steady. That doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're conserving your power. Because when you stop giving toxic people the energy they're demanding, they're forced to face the emptiness of their own behavior without your emotions filling in the gaps for them. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in dealing with toxic people is moving from reacting to responding. A reaction is instant, it's emotional, it's automatic, it comes from a place of defense, frustration, or even hurt. And that's exactly what toxic people want from you, because when you react, you hand over control. You let them decide the tone of the conversation, you let them decide how long it drags on, and you let them dictate where your energy goes. Reactions are like little sparks, quick, heated, and easy to ignite. They don't take thought, they just happen in the moment, and that's why toxic people love to provoke them. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's not about matching their tone or giving them the same energy back. A response comes from slowing down and choosing your words, or sometimes choosing no words at all. It's a pause. It's that split second of breathing space where you step outside of their game and decide how you actually want to show up. The difference between reaction and response is the difference between playing on their terms and standing on your own. Think about it like this: a toxic person throws a jab expecting you to swing back. If you react, you've given them exactly what they came for. If you respond, you choose a different path, calm words, neutral tone, or even silence. That doesn't feed them the same way. They don't get the satisfaction of seeing you unravel, and they don't get the control of steering you into an argument you never wanted to be in. A response shows them you're aware of their game, but you're not willing to play it. And here's the part that makes it powerful. Responding doesn't just change the way they experience you, it changes the way you experience yourself. When you start responding instead of reacting, you walk away from conversations lighter, not heavier. You feel more in control of yourself instead of wondering why you lost your temper again. You realize you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to, and you don't need to explain yourself every time someone demands it. Responding is about protecting your peace in the middle of their chaos, and it's a skill that gets stronger every time you practice it. Non-reactivity is one of the most powerful tools you can use against toxic behavior because it completely flips the dynamic that toxic people are counting on. They live off the spark of your reaction. They throw out insults, they make passive-aggressive comments, they stir up drama, and they wait for you to take the bait. When you do, they know they've got your attention, your energy, and your emotions wrapped around their words. But when you refuse to react, when you stay calm and steady, the game suddenly loses its pull. The truth is, silence and neutrality are far louder to a toxic person than raised voices or long explanations. They expect conflict. They expect resistance. They expect you to get defensive. What they don't expect is calm. What they don't expect is stillness. That's what throws them off balance, because they don't know how to gain power without pulling you into chaos. When your face stays relaxed, your voice stays even, and your words are short and simple, you deny them the emotional charge they're looking for. Non-reactivity doesn't mean you're weak or that you don't notice what's happening. It's not about pretending something didn't bother you. It's about controlling your outward expression in a way that protects your peace. It's a skill like holding a poker face when someone is trying to read you. The calmer you stay, the less power they have to twist your emotions or use your words against you. That's why toxic people often escalate when you don't react. They'll push harder, try new tactics, dig deeper. But the more you hold steady, the more exhausting it becomes for them because they're not getting what they want. And here's the real benefit of non-reactivity. It puts the control back in your hands. You're no longer being dragged into a reaction you regret later. You're no longer giving away pieces of your energy every time someone decides to provoke you. You stand in your own calm, and that calm becomes a shield. People can throw whatever they want at you, but if you don't pick it up, it doesn't stick to you. Non-reactivity turns their drama into noise in the background instead of something that takes over your entire headspace. Boundaries don't always have to be something you announce. They don't always have to be explained, defended, or laid out in detail for someone else to respect them. Sometimes the most powerful boundary you can set with a toxic person is the one you enforce through your behavior without ever having to say a word, because words can be twisted. They can be ignored. They can even be turned against you. But consistent action is much harder to argue with, and when your actions show where your line is, it speaks louder than anything you could explain. Think about it. If someone is constantly trying to bait you into an argument, your words might tell them, "I don't want to fight." But if you still keep explaining, defending, or getting pulled into back and forth debates, your actions show them that the door is still open. When your behavior changes, when you stop engaging, when you keep your answers short, when you walk away instead of arguing, the boundary is clear without you needing to announce it. You've shown them where the line is, and more importantly, you've shown yourself. Boundaries without words are powerful because they shift the focus from trying to control someone else to controlling yourself. You can't make a toxic person respect your limits, but you can decide how you respond when they push against them. That's what makes behavioral boundaries so effective. They remove the bargaining, the justifying, The endless loop of trying to get someone else to understand. Instead, you let your choices do the speaking. You don't attend every argument. You don't answer every message right away. You don't allow your time or energy to be hijacked. And after a while, the consistency of those actions makes it impossible to ignore where your limits stand. It also protects your energy because you're not wasting it on long explanations that go nowhere. You're not giving them more words to twist or more emotions to exploit. You're simply showing up in a different way. Boundaries in action are calm, steady, and quiet, but they create a shift that toxic people notice quickly. When they see that their usual tactics no longer get the same access to you, they feel the wall even if you never announced it out loud. Toxic people thrive on control. Every jab, every manipulation, every guilt trip is designed to put them in the driver's seat of your emotions. They want to steer how you feel, how you respond, and ultimately how you see yourself. The moment you take the bait and react the way they expect, they're in charge. That's why so many of these interactions leave you feeling drained, second-guessing yourself, and wondering why you even engaged in the first place. The power they hold doesn't come from who they are. It comes from how you respond to them. The reversal happens when you stop playing by their script. Instead of meeting their accusations with explanations, you give calm, short answers. Instead of letting their sarcasm spark anger, you let silence do the work. Instead of proving your worth to someone determined not to see it, you decide you don't need their validation. That's when the control shifts, because they can't lead a game you're not willing to play. The moment you stop reacting in the way they're counting on, they lose the leverage they had over you. It's not about overpowering them, it's about removing their ability to overpower you. When you stay grounded, when you respond instead of react, when you enforce boundaries through your actions, you take back the position they thought belonged to them. And the irony is, you don't need to raise your voice or outwit them to do it. The shift happens quietly, in your composure, in your restraint, in your refusal to be pulled into the storm they're trying to create. That calmness unnerves them because they realize the grip they once had is slipping. And here's the part that makes it last. Once you experience that reversal of power, you start to see that their behavior has nothing to do with your worth or your identity. You see that their control was never real. It was only borrowed from your reactions. When you stop lending them that power, it's like cutting the strings of a puppet. They might try to tug harder. They might scramble to find another way in. But eventually the lack of control becomes clear, and what used to drain you starts to lose its pull. Toxic people don't usually walk away because you confront them. They walk away because you no longer give them what they came for. Their patterns rely on your attention, your reaction, and your willingness to engage. When that cycle breaks, the relationship starts to feel empty for them. It's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. No matter how many matches they strike, nothing catches. Over time, that lack of fuel creates distance without you having to force it. The interesting part is that this distance doesn't usually happen overnight. At first, they might push harder, trying to get the same response they've always gotten from you. They might raise the volume, sharpen their words, or come up with new ways to bait you. But when they keep running into the same calm, steady version of you, when they realize the spark they're looking for isn't there anymore, they start to lose interest. It's not fun for them anymore. The drama isn't alive, the control isn't working, and the payoff isn't worth the effort. That's when the natural distance begins to take shape. They stop calling as often. They stop circling back to the same arguments. They start pulling away, not because you push them, but because they're not getting what they want. And the beauty of this is that you don't have to create chaos to get space from them. You don't have to fight, explain, or burn bridges. You simply stop feeding the connection in the way they're used to, and eventually they drift. This distance also gives you breathing room. It creates space for clarity. When you're no longer caught in the constant push and pull, you can see the relationship for what it is instead of being lost in the noise of it. You start to recognize how much energy you've been giving away and how much lighter life feels when you're not tied up in their cycles. And as that space grows, so does your peace. The absence of their constant pull gives you room to focus on yourself again, and you realize that the distance they created by leaving is actually the protection you were looking for all along. The biggest shift in dealing with toxic people isn't about getting them to change, it's about choosing your peace over their chaos. Because the truth is, toxic people rarely wake up one day and suddenly become different. Their patterns are ingrained. Their way of stirring up drama, seeking control, and feeding off your energy is what they've relied on for years. If you spend your life waiting for them to change, you'll keep yourself stuck in a cycle of disappointment. But when you decide that your peace matters more than winning an argument, more than proving a point, more than being understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you, everything begins to shift in your favor. Peace is powerful because it doesn't depend on anyone else's behavior. It comes from your own choices. You can't control the words someone throws at you, but you can control whether you let those words settle inside you. You can't control how someone tries to bait you, but you can control whether you step into the trap. That's where your peace becomes your strength. It's the one thing toxic people can't take from you unless you hand it over. When you hold on to that peace, you stop playing by their rules. You no longer measure your worth by their approval. You no longer waste nights replaying arguments in your head. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to someone who isn't listening. And that calm presence, that unshakable center, becomes something toxic people can't penetrate. They lose their power the moment you stop giving them access to it. And what's interesting is that peace doesn't always look loud or dramatic. It's often quiet. It's you walking away from a conversation that used to trap you for hours. It's you staying calm when someone expected you to explode. It's you choosing silence instead of over-explaining. It's you remembering that their behavior doesn't define your value, and you don't have to take ownership of their chaos. That quiet shift, that invisible strength, is what makes toxic people eventually move on, because they realize they can't win a battle against someone who refuses to fight in the first place. At the end of the day, toxic people only have as much power as you give them. The one powerful shift isn't about changing who they are, it's about changing how you show up. When you stop feeding their drama, when you stay calm, when you choose your peace over their chaos, the control they thought they had over you disappears. And that's when they leave you alone. Because toxic people can't survive where there's no reaction, no fuel, no fight. Protect your peace, and you'll notice something. The people who thrive on chaos don't know what to do with you anymore. And that's exactly how you win.